My name is Louise Pennebaker, and I'm from Houston, Texas. We are in my studio shop called Fern's Gallop in the Heights. Fern is the name I've given to the creative muse in my life. And so this is a representation of things that she would curate in her space. When I was younger, we all have things that we're afraid of. And in my mind, I would be like, what would this character in my mind is like this cowgirl person who's self-sufficient and independent behave in this way. And so it's always stuck with me. And I think that's why the character is always in my work, where it's like, well, what would this character do? And it just is easier to make a braver decision from that perspective than from my own. I did not always grow up knowing I wanted to be an artist. It wasn't till later, when I was probably a teenager, I realized that art was an avenue to express yourself and connect with others without using words, and that was always appealing to me. But I did a class in New York, that drawing on the right side of the brain. There was that book, and the woman did a workshop, and I think that was when I realized that, oh, I actually can do this. I don't have to be a person who started drawing when they were 2 years old, and it was clear right away what they wanted to do. And luckily, my parents were supportive, and I went to art school, and that started my journey. I went to school for painting, and then I ended up going to grad school for communication design, because I was like, I'm not going to be a painter, I'm going to do graphic design, which I do occasionally from time to time still. But I think that program, that MFA, somehow solidified just the idea of like making these connections conceptually and how I could use that in an art practice. Whereas before, when I was painting, I feel like I was just painting something to paint it, and like the concept wasn't quite clear. And after going to that program, it helped solidify what I wanted to say. I like working from old photographs. I do take, I'll take old family photos or just go through a box and see what picture speaks to me, or I'll find old photos from the Library of Congress and then superimpose myself on to the image. And the kind of cowgirl Western aesthetic is often the theme. I just like the idea of like our fascination with like the American West in general, and that idea of freedom and expressing that and that identity that people have attached to it. So that's where a lot of the cactus pieces come into, where it's just creating this sort of dramatic scene of the desert, and that kind of fantasy of getting away from it all. When people from other countries are like, oh, you're from Texas, and then they're like, oh, the cowboy and the boots. And even though that is not me at all, there's something that like I kind of get a kick out of us all identifying with that in some way, especially when you leave Texas and there is this sense of like home when you see it. And so a lot of my work surrounds that too. And like cowboys and cowgirls are just cool. I guess you can see a connection with the collages and the tablescapes, where I use like those plates usually have like the same pattern over and over again. But like this piece is about like being curious enough to leave the pattern and then what can grow from that curiosity. And with the bowl in the China shop one too is just obviously just like breaking the pattern altogether and just be like, ah, explosion with that. So I also just like doing pieces of interiors that feel like home, like these pieces, just when you walk around a house and you're like looking at all the images and the way those are seared into your brain. My first piece I did of these series was of my memory of my grandmother's wall, and just how when you walk around a house, how it becomes sort of this museum of your family and these little artifacts, and focusing in and taking a moment to, I guess, admire those spaces. I do a lot of work with the night sky or a big Texas sky, and there's something, I guess I want people to also feel that sense of awe and beauty in our landscapes. The idea of like the majesty in the outdoors and bringing that like spiritual connection with human beings and the outdoors as well. And so I'm hoping that people see the collages, they get that sense that they're actually going out west. I try to make familiar connections to my work. Like this is The Goodnight Moon, which I have 4 children, so I've been reading that book a lot over the past 10 years, and I read it when I was a kid. And so I love putting little hints in my work, and then when the viewer connects to it, that is always delightful. And they're making connections to their own life and then seeing it in the work, and that always brings me a lot of joy when people catch it. And then also too, if somebody sees your work and they like it, to know that like, if I'm communicating something, whether it's humorous or if it's serious, that they also are connecting that too. But again, there's no words. They're just like, capturing the feeling that somebody else can relate to or experience is part of the reward. So I am very honored to be in Texas Emerging 5, and I'm looking forward to getting to know all the other artists better. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with other artists and show with Bolts.